The art department has Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah. Well, but like for this workshop, looking weird.
Okay.
Nobody good. I don't know. How do you temporary?
Okay. So IGD5 asset creation. I don't think I need to explain to you, Rami, what IGD is. So this is the workshop where I kind of want to talk about. So I am on a game. I am on a game team. I need an asset for my game. How do I get that asset? Or conversely, I am an asset creator. What is the how am I going to interact with teams? What is that pipeline for getting my assets to teams?
Literally just
okay, so first of all, just some basic definitions. An asset refers to any individual concrete deliverable item that winds up in the finished game file folder, right? Every file in the actual zipped executable that you're going to hand to your consumer is an asset. So this includes sprites, sound effects, music tracks, background paintings, pieces of text, dialogue. Technically speaking, each individual script is also an asset, but that gets handled a little differently. We don't really think of them as assets, even though they actually technically are. And how do they wind up in the game? The basic pipeline for how we go from game without asset to game with asset. Usually one member of the team, such as a designer or a programmer or a writer, will be working and doing their job, and they'll realize, hey, I need an asset for blank. And then they will send a request for that new asset to an asset creator, right? A writer or an artist or an audio designer or someone. Who will then go ahead and create the asset and to put into the game. Is the basic pipeline we're looking at here. Just a very quick aside, do you need assets in VGDC? Nope. Right, like gray boxing is a great technique for getting games made without assets. It works perfectly fine. Programmer art doesn't look good, but it works. It allows you to design your game. It allows you to program your game. Also, there's a bunch of good art for free online. Here are some links to my favorite websites. Other officers will give you other links to other good websites. Just remember when you're using other people's art that they'll probably put stipulations on their license, like you need to credit me or something like that. Respect those licenses.
I don't know why.
This is definitely a good approach, right? It is going to have zero impact on your ability to design your game, or to program your game, or to produce your game, or to write your game, right? The story and the game design and the mechanics and the code will all be there unchanged. It'll just look a little differently on the surface, but that doesn't matter. So if it's just a small little learning project, this is probably the way to go. If it's a little something more invested with, you want to put in your portfolio, you want to really custom tailor it, then you're going to want to use our actual asset pipeline. Okay, so let's talk about this asset pipeline from the perspective of someone who's actually requesting.
Yeah, because we're cutting the grips. So basically we have to recount those.
Okay, so when to request. This is actually a very challenging subject in VGDC. Because of the way our schedules are set up, we kind of create some complications. So the basic principle is assets are expensive to create. Right? Asset creation is one of the most expensive parts of game design, if not the single most expensive part of game design. So you don't want to waste it. Right? When you make an asset, that asset wants to wind up in the finished game, or you're wasting a lot of time and money. And so be very careful when you create an asset. This is an asset that you actually need, that you actually want, that's actually going to go in your game. Don't waste, don't request assets for mechanics or for story elements or for characters that you think you might cut or that have a reasonable chance of being cut. Don't request assets for game projects that you think are going to go under. Right.
Keep the background constant.
At minimum, do not request an asset for something until you have it fully implemented and functioning in your actual game. Right? Don't request a character art until you know who your character is, you don't know the personality, they're running around the screen, they can jump, all that fun stuff.
Also don't do fighting games.
I mean,
yeah, don't do fighting games. Once an asset is created,
I would say
don't expect to be able to change anything related to that asset. That asset might have additional function requirements stuck onto it by its creation that tie down how you can use it. Right? Like if you get a character attack sprite and that character attack very clearly shows the player lunging, you can't change your attack to be more of a slashing arm. Right? You are stuck in lunging now. So don't be very careful that like when you're getting an asset or something that might walk you into decisions that might not be the actual right decisions, right? So, you know, if I make this thing and I'm like, hey, just make a generic sword attack in front, and they give me a lunge, and then I realize, wait, I actually wanted to go all the way in front and hit up top too. That's what the game design needs. You have two options. Don't do the lesser of two game designs, or waste a ton of time and money on an asset you didn't actually need.
Basically do what you're doing,
so don't get yourself in that hole. Be very careful that when you make an asset, you really know what it's going to do, and how it's going to work, and you aren't going to change it.
That's just some modifications.
Any questions, comments, concerns, about the basics of why you shouldn't waste assets and how to avoid wasting assets?
Yeah, you're right.
I just want to comment that it actually is really important that you give artist specifics.
I have 10 more slides.
Okay.
We're gonna get there.
No, that's just fine.
I don't know what like this.
That's on the slide.
You were asking for comments. I commented.
Fair. I meant the comments about this slide.
The specific slide.
So as long as you don't go over.
Yes, you cannot have to.
Okay.
Because
well, obviously.
No, actually,
Okay.
I'm good. I understand.
Okay, cool.
That's the
You decide that you have a character, you have a main character in your game. Do you go request their art?
10 seconds to look it over and see what buzzers.
You decide you have a main character in the game?
Yes.
No, you make the character function in the game first.
Correct.
That's true. So if you get 10 seconds of their
Right.
I'd rather put these.
This is where things get really, really hairy.
You can read
The flip side of the coin of assets are really time consuming to create, so don't waste them, is assets are really time consuming and expensive to create, so you need to give your creators time to make them. Meaning that basically, right, so you don't want, request your assets early. Don't request your assets at the last minute during the home stretch, right? Request assets early and give your asset creators time to get their assets done. This gets very hairy because it takes about 7 weeks for you to get to a place where your game is comfortable and you actually know what assets you need. And it takes about 7 weeks to actually go make those assets. And you have 7 weeks to do both of those. So basically just fall into a time paradox and die.
So wait, isn't there a contradiction here then? If you're waiting until you absolutely 100% implemented something in the game until you asked for assets, but yet you need more time in advance to get those assets to put them in, so what do?
Fall into a time paradox and die?
Really?
If you find a good solution, please tell us.
Oh my God.
We don't have one yet. Tina, do you have a solution
For what?
to the problem of need to wait to make sure that every game is working for request assets and need to request assets early so asset creators have time to make assets?
Just do both programming and art. Problem solved.
Problem solved, B Tina. There we go. That's the solution.
Yeah, that's how I did in Ace Attorney. I was like, okay, this is done, go back to drawing. That's done, go back to drawing. That's done, go back to drawing.
It's basically what I do when I make stuff myself.
Okay. So yeah, this is fun. There actually are solutions to this. The biggest solution, the best solution that we've kind of found is you need to know what in your game, you need to know what your game is going to drive what assets you need, and you need to know what parts of your game are going to be asset neutral, right? So like how the character attacks is going to affect what assets you need. How much damage that attack does, probably not going to affect the asset that much, right? It does damage, there's going to be blood splatter no matter how much damage it is, right? The sword's going to swing no matter how much damage it deals. That's a little more asset neutral, right? Like the fact that the character can walk back and forth and up and down, or the fact that your enemy can walk back and forth and up and down is going to drive what assets you need. Exactly what pattern they're walking in, not really going to drive what assets you need. Right? Like the fact that you're on a text box with 5 lines of text gonna drive what asset you need. The fact what those actual 5 lines of text are, not really gonna affect what asset you need. Right?
So as a general rule, if you're 100% sure on something that's not completely specific, then you can ask for
Yes.
asset that you need.
You
for
don't
that.
need all the details, you just need all the details that are actually going to affect what the asset is. Right? But like what actually things that aren't going to affect the asset, that no matter what, if all your options require the same asset, right? Like if all the possible 5 lines of text that you might want to write there require the same text box, you just don't know which 5 lines of text you're going to put in there, you're fine to request the text box.
Takes in the sound array.
And so what this kind of comes down to is you also really want to be strategic about this and figure out all the things that are going to drive your asset needs early in the project and waylay anything that you can change once you have assets at the end of the project. Right? Like don't start number tweaking until you've done all the things that are going to turn your assets. Because every day you spend number tweaking before you have assets is one day less your artists are going to have to make those assets. So instead of doing number tweaking early in the project, focus on things that are going to drive your asset creation. Focus on, hey, what actual attacks are going to happen? Hey, what shape are these things going to be? How are this thing going to move? Right? Focus on that stuff. Don't focus on the numbers or the text or how many Goombas are on the screen or anything like that.
Okay.
No matter how many Goombas you put there, you're still going to need the same Goomba, right? So pipeline it smart so that you get all the things that are going to drive your asset done as soon as possible, and make up for that by putting all the stuff that isn't going to change your asset until the end of the project.
Play it, let the level play out, wait for them
Does that
to
make sense?
facilitate.
Right, like figure out what your character's personality is before you figure the backstory. So the backstory probably isn't going to show up in their sprite.
Yeah.
Their personality probably will, right? Any questions, comments about this slide?
No, I get it.
Okay.
Let me just say with the
Alright. So some actual to-do list. See, I told you specifics were on this. I told you that was coming. Right, to-do list of good things to do while you're actually requesting an asset. Right, so you want to be very specific. Right, say what the asset is in the game world, where in your game you're going to be using it, what you're going to be doing with it. What is it a monster? Is it an item? Is it a right? Is it a weapon? Is it a chest? Is it a player element? When does how early in the game does it show up? How late in the game does it show up? Can the player interact with it? How does the player interact with it?
Gonna kill himself in that thing.
All of that stuff, right? Tell the artist exactly what you're making. Give context, right? Talk about what is your world? What is your story? What is this item's backstory? Where does it come from? What technology exists to have created this item? Is this chest made in a world with industrial machinery, or is it made in a world where they had to throw it together with hammers and nails? Or was it made in a world where they had to beat it together with rocks because we're making a Stone Age game? Right? If it's a character, talk about the personality, right? Who are they? Where do they come from? What do they act like? What do they, right? Tell the story of the asset. Give its world context. If you have a world document, you might want to share that with your asset creator so they can actually, get a broader context for, hey, what actually is this place? What world does this item inhabit? Be emotional, right? This is actually a really important one, right? Talk about, you don't necessarily want to say what colors things should be, but you do want to talk about how things should feel, right? Saying like, hey, is this a scary chest? Is this an alluring chest? Is this a chest that says, I don't want to go near that, that's probably a thing? Or is this a chest that says, oh yay, loot, right? Emotions and player feelings are a pretty universal language, and so they're a really powerful language for communicating between departments like this. And if there's any non-literal information that it needs to convey, right? Is it like, needs to say, hey, this is a dangerous thing. Hey, this monster's wounded. Hey, you can use this. Hey, this is pick-upable. Right? All that extra game information that's not necessarily literal about like what it is in the game world, but the players only get across. You should tell your asset creator that so they can actually know to communicate.
Yeah, probably.
Right? You know, if it's something that
I'll
the
add
needs to
more
pick up,
I need to go
maybe
get one.
make it glow, as opposed to if it was in the background, I think that might make it a little duller and not stand out as hard.
Okay, so give it a title.
And then be technical. Include technical details, specs, resolution, file types, frame count, all that jazz. That's really important. Give all those technical specs. Any questions?
Maybe
Comments,
something
concerns,
that everyone
clarifications, giving
who's
about this?
open as a log file and it won't let other things.
I want to comment. I think the last one is actually probably the most important because if you like make something in the wrong resolution, that's not an easy fix.
Yep. Yes, it is. Last is a place of importance.
Awesome. We're good to go.
Anything else?
I actually did something.
Hooray. Congrats. Your first commit.
What's better, giving a character's detailed backstory or giving a rough sketch of the character's face?
Throw that into the ground.
Detailed backstory.
Detailed backstory.
I have a sound for graphics later. I need to find which script it is though.
What's better, talking about a world's blacksmithing culture
See you guys
or
Friday, I guess?
You know what? Okay.
Whenever.
Friday. I'll get back to you on Discord about what to do this week. You need
I think I'm gonna cancel.
essentially.
I'll do the
I'll
talking about
or giving
the
a
tutorial
detailed
told me.
description of what a house should look
sure.
like.
Yeah.
and
all the
then
features
after
they
that,
have.
I'll ask.
I
you
didn't hear everything you said.
What's better, giving a
You mean do
detailed
the
description
tutorial
of
scene?
a world's
What was it?
blacksmithing culture,
Just,
or
You
listing
move
out a
it.
laundry,
You move
giving
it
a
around.
laundry list of all the features and
Just
qualities that need
recreate
to go onto a
the
sword
main
cell.
scene using
The
background.
first thing you said.
Just let you familiarize with yourself with how the scene works, what the scripts are.
I'll see if I can do that. I don't want to miss
Okay.
something out though. Or
Don't
like-
Moving
go off
on
and make
to
it create
the
new
don'ts.
Okay.
The flip side of this coin,
As long as you don't
this
modify
kind of
any
really
scenes, nothing
boils
bad.
down to don't
See you guys.
tell the asset creators how to do their job. They're the expert, you're not.
Why did my
You are
laptop
going to
go-
them for a reason. They're not if you were as good as art as them, you would not be going to them to have them do your art. Don't tell them how to do art. Is basically what this comes down to, right? Don't be specific. Don't tell them exactly what things should look like or exactly what things should sound like, right? Do and don't. Do all the things that we were on the first slide. Don't do the things don't give them, don't demand that they make things exactly, don't give them a sketch and say make this but cleaner, right? Don't be that overbearing.
Just give them leeway.
Right. We have to
Yeah,
pull now.
right. If you're gonna give sketches, say like something like this, but feel free to change it, right? Don't be overbearing. Don't say it has to be like this, right? Don't give musts unless they're important for gameplay or canonical reasons. Right? Like your asset creators are really good creative people. They're gonna come up with good ideas. Give them room to come up with good ideas. They're also really good at their jobs. Let them do their jobs. Don't tell them how to do their jobs. Don't try to explain your criticism. Don't try to explain things in like art language, so to speak, unless you actually really speak art language, because odds are they speak art language, you think you speak art language. So, give them in general terms that you can actually express clearly, and don't just like make jibber jabber about color palettes and composition that you don't actually understand unless you actually understand it. And then this is a really big one that I think also kind of really expresses the don'ts. Don't expect something specific for a final product, right? You're gonna have a vision in your head what the asset's gonna look like. Don't actually expect to get that vision in your head. Odds are, they're the better artist than you. They're gonna have a cooler idea for what your character should look like than you do. Let them give you that cooler character, right? And at minimum, trying to get them to do exactly what's in your head isn't gonna go anywhere they can't see inside your head. So it's gonna be a minimum waste of your time. And don't fret about every little detail. You don't need to love every little thing they do. Some things are just gonna be subjective, and just because you personally don't like something doesn't mean it's not really damn good, right? Your game's not for you, your game is for your audience. You don't need to love every tiny little detail. Any questions about the don'ts? Okay. So we're gonna flip around the camera for a little bit. I think this is probably something I'm just gonna let Tina talk about for however long assets to say about it.
What?
The asset creator's perspective, the perspective of asset creation.
Oh, thank you. The recording game. I tried that. Wasn't fun. I didn't get paid. And I almost died in that 2 quarters. And also, you just straight up took my notes and didn't like, no one ever finished them?
No, I thought they were done.
God damn it. Alright, so, drawing-wise, for modification reasons, just in case people want to change something like, I don't know, this color is a little bit too dark for like the background, I can't see the character, or like, actually my character wants to do swinging instead of like stabbing, you have the sword, it's better to save things in different layers. So when it does come to modification, you'll be able to do that in a relatively fast speed. Second of all, do show the draft before shipping. This is what I learned in fighting games because they do have a very peculiar style of how each animation should be played out. I actually have to ask them do a live person demonstration before I can draw them, and that's why Kenny kicked Itai twice. So you definitely should show your requester some drafts before you can actually color them. That way it's easier for them to see whether if it's what it liked or what it not like. And in draft stage, it's so much easier to just change things around. Like I just do like completely messed up scribbles when I did the fighting games, and I usually they say like, yeah, it looks good. Yeah, you can do that, and then I go back and color everything. Layering is important. This is depending on the methods for the animation, because usually what I do is I do layer things in a really detailed way. Like I have like 3 different layers for just hair, and I have 2 layers for like arms and all that. That's because physics-wise and animation-wise, the hair in your back usually don't show in front of your face, and then your bangs do. So definitely layering is important for future animation, so you don't have to worry about, oh my god, my hair interface and the same hair, now I gotta animate hair, oh god, I have to like actually break them apart and do different things. And same thing again, separate the parts, so like if you're making a walking animation, it's better to separate like the torso and the limbs, so you can actually do them in a faster fashion. And communication for animation before and after, this is easier for me to do because I use Dragon Bones, so I can actually show them a preview before I actually do anything. And if they have anything like maybe this frame like can go faster or that can go slower, I can just adjust on the spot and then export it later to get them. Tools wise, I prefer Dragon Bones. It makes my life easier, and until you draw frames, I don't have time to draw frames.
So save your stuff.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yep.
I said work in progress notes.
It's just.
I thought you said, you know, like this is about your work in progress notes. Keep your original files, such as your work in progress notes, on your animation.
Oh my god. Fine.
It's okay. This isn't gonna get published for another 4 days.
Okay. Good.
You or I can yell at Melina about finishing these.
Oh my god.
Okay, so that's going to affect everyone, asset creators and asset requesters. Scale and resolution. We kind of touched upon this before. I think you understand this. Scale is very important. Each game will need to have a single consistent scale of pixels to unity units, right? So you need to establish how many pixels go in one unity unit for your entire game, for every asset in your entire game. It needs to have the same scale in terms of unity units. By default, it's 100. Feel free to change it. If you change it to the same thing for everything. And then you also want a really consistent scale of unity units to real-world meters, right? 1-to-1 is standard. 1 unity unit is 1 meter. 1 pixel is 1 centimeter. Again, you can change those numbers as much as you please, but be consistent for your entire game, right? Don't make an apple that is 150 pixels tall or 512 pixels tall, and then make a character that's 64 pixels tall, unless your apple is gigantic and your character is small.
If you're downloading this code.
Because it's just going to look a lot better if everything's got a consistent scale and everything matches together. For those of you I mean, I don't think it applies to you, Rami, but for some people it kind of looks fine, especially if you're just like in the programmer sphere or the designer sphere. But if you actually know a thing or two about art, apparently I'm told it looks hideous if you mess with resolutions. So don't mess with resolutions. Do not, if you decide that something needs to be bigger, don't change the scale. Don't just scale it up. Your artist will murder you. Speaking from personal experience.
Brian ruined all my art because he used cubes as placeholders and scaled them down in Unity so that when he switched to actual art, it just scales to himself up.
Yes.
I'm so petty about that, by the way. Salty.
What? Who did this?
Brian.
In which game?
One of the global game jam games.
Ah. Don't do that. Do the not that. This is a common thing that non-artists don't think about, and especially like programmers think, oh, I can just scale it. You can't just scale it, apparently. And then, once you have decide on what your standard is early, and then once you have a standard, tell everyone on the team, every programmer, every artist needs to be aware of what the standard is, and they all need to know to stick to it. Any questions about this?
No.
Cool. Rough drafts and feedback. Rough drafts and sketches are great tools for keeping asset creators and asset requesters on the same page. That, you're all working together and you have the same ideas and you're working together towards a common asset goal, as opposed to the asset creator going off and giving something the asset requester something that the asset requester very much did not want. When you are shown a rough draft, things that you want to be talking about, things that you really should be pointing out. If your asset requester does something that raises a canonical issue, right? If your asset requester gives a Philibarian a red pair of socks, but in Philibar, red is a horrible color and no one would ever wear red in Philibar because it's the color of some past evil dictator that they all hate, point that out. Else your game's gonna have canonical inconsistencies. Your asset creator won't know your entire goddamn canon. It's fine to say like, hey, by the way, there's a thing in our canon that you should be aware of here. Raise technical issues, right? If if your sprite needs to fit a certain shape to fit with the collider and the current sprite does not fit with a certain shape, if it's the wrong resolution, if it's got opacity problems, if its opacity is not going to work with your system, if it's got too many frames or too few frames to work with your system, point that out, right? If it breaks, if it needs to stay in a certain box and their sword thrust animation goes out of that box, point that out, right? Your technical requirements are your technical requirements. It's better to deal with it early than, have your system break and make everything look ugly. Do tell your artist what you really like. That's good, so that they have a sense of, hey, this is what I should go for, this is what I should do more of in the future. Also, compliments are nice, just compliment people for its own sake. And then if something needs to come across for the story, like if a character has a very important neckerchief that is of great importance to their character, and the neckerchief isn't really that visible on their character sprite, point that out. Say, hey, this thing is important. Make it more visible. Or if a thing doesn't shine enough and the player really needs to see it and go grab it, hey, say, from a design perspective, this thing really needs to stand out to the player and shine. Can you make it shine more? And then the one big thing that you don't point out is don't tell you what you don't like. Don't criticize their art. As I've said, they're the expert. You're not the expert. They know what looks good. You don't know what looks good. Stay in your goddamn lane. Right? Do point out issues and problems. Don't just say, hey, I don't think this looks good. They are the authority on what looks good. If they think it looks good, you are the one who's wrong here. They are literally the person who has studied what looks good.
It's also a rough draft, so
yeah.
Nothing ever looks good in a rough, ever.
So don't waste your time just insulting their art or saying, hey, this is not my preference, or hey, I don't like this. If it's going to raise a problem, okay, point out the problem. Right? If it's going to cause a technical problem or break your canon, or it needs to do a thing that it's not doing, okay, yes, point that out. That's important. If it's just like, hey, I don't think this looks good, just keep your mouth closed. You're not going to accomplish anything with that. Any questions, comments, concerns, clarifications, misgivings about rough draft feedback?
From get back history.
I'm good.
Anything to add, Tina?
No.
Cool. Okay. So now.
Yeah, it's just saying.
Wait a minute. I'm on the art strict team.
I mean,
It's
fair,
all the files.
but also I want to see you fill out an asset request so I can look at that asset request and see if you understand what goes into an asset request.
Okay.
You don't actually need to submit the asset request. I actually recommend you don't, so that Portalina doesn't get flooded.
I think the strength of visual stuff is like.
I actually had
if
class.
that does work fine if you understand the project you're working on really well.
Or
Or
just
if
go-
things don't
or
go
just go
wrong,
to class.
but not.
I'm sorry, dude.
Go wrong.
That was really good though. That was informative.
I have faith that you have taken away from this, and if you do fill out an asset request form, I will criticize it. Or if you want more practice or feedback on the stuff in this workshop, just fill it out and show it to me.
Okay.
Because there's just the one view, so I would have time.
Do you do this workshop again for people on a different day or no?
Thursday.
Thursday? Oh, hope more people show up.
Yeah, Thursday's been getting good attendance. The Monday attendance has been really falling off.
I think that's probably really useful, that presentation, now that there's a art strike team.
It's kind of what it's for. Any questions? Anything you want to add? Well, you still have my active attention?
Not at this moment, but if I think of something, I'll ask.